All right, I'm about to make my world famous cookies. First thing that you want to do is you want to add 3 sticks of butter into a mixer. Make sure you have a good mixer. I have a KitchenAid mixer here. It really works out well. 3 sticks of butter. That's a cup and a half for those of you guys that like to measure with cups. Next thing you want to do is take a cup and a quarter of brown sugar, light brown sugar, and you want to make sure that you pack it down inside the cup and a quarter measurement here. And you want to add it into the butter that should be mixing. Alright, next you want to take regular white sugar and do the same measurement, a cup and a quarter of white sugar, and add it into the mix that's already mixing. If you notice, I kicked up the speed a little bit to get the butter to actually stick to the sugar. Once I add this white sugar, it's really going to stick. And so now you want to add 2 eggs to the mix. Make sure you crack your eggs in a separate bowl. It's very important to do that, because if you have bad eggs, you don't want to mix it into the mix of sugar and butter already, or else you waste your batch. You notice here, and slowly add it in here. And I am taking my sweet old time, making sure that I get a good batch. Next step is you want to add 1 tablespoon of vanilla. And make sure you add 1 tablespoon at least into the mix. Pour it right in. And in actuality, I usually add a little bit more than just 1 tablespoon, because you can never have too much flavor of vanilla in your cookies. One thing I forgot to mention too is make sure you use pure vanilla extract. No corn syrup added. You don't want the fake corn syrup vanilla to be in your cookies, or else you have fake cookies too. Now what I did here is I actually turned up the mixer, because I noticed that the butter really wasn't mixing in with the sugar and the vanillas all that well. So that's what you want to do. Turn it up, and you want to get it to a nice little fluffy mix, because this is the base of everything. Notice it's mixing really fast. Okay, this part is also critical as well. Make sure you count out 4 cups of flour. And you want to make sure you sift the flour. This has not been sifted yet. Normally I just pour it into a bowl, and then I'll bring my sifter. I'll take off the mixer, bring my sifter right here, and sift it as I need it. Put 2 spoonfuls in at a time and sift until I finish it. Alright, I'm just finishing up on my last little bit of flour that I'm trying to sift. And make sure you sift it. You don't want to have lumpy or hard cookies. Do a nice sifting job. And you can see here's all the sifted flour. Now you want to add 2 teaspoons of baking soda. I've actually already added 1 teaspoon inside here. And make sure you use baking soda and a reputable brand. This is Arm & Hammer baking soda. And make sure it's baking soda, not baking powders. We want cookies here, not muffins. And you want to dump it in there. And I already added 1 in there. Last but not least, you also want to add salt. And make sure you add a half a teaspoon of salt. I typically don't measure my salt, because it really doesn't play too much of a factor in it, but it definitely does give your cookies a nice little taste. Next, you want to whip out your paddle, depress it into the dough, lock your head down, and whip it. Not too fast at the beginning, because it will puff up and go all over the place. And then once the butter joins the flour, you want to mix it until it's a nice dough consistency. And then it will start to roll and roll and roll, and then you'll start to congeal, as you can see here. And it went from a powder to a nice dough mix. Make sure you do this without the ingredients added into it, because if you add the ingredients, what will happen is it will break the ingredients within the food, and you'll have smaller pieces of chocolate chip, which is not really a good thing. And sometimes even it will make your chips a solid chocolate instead of chocolate chip cookies. Make sure all dough gets treated the same way. So if you do have rises on the top here, make sure you paddle them inside here with a nice soft spatula. Be careful when you do this. You don't want your spatula to get caught up with the paddle and create other issues. This is actually a good consistency right now. Let me just break off the dough ball off of there. So as I had mentioned before, you want to make sure that you break off the dough off the paddle. And then now it's time for the condiments that you add. In my case, I'm adding craisins, if you will, or whatever you want to call them, cranberries, dried cranberries, and white chocolate. I personally like this. It has a little more of a fancy flavor into it. What I would add here is about 1.5 cups of each. Mix them together and make sure you pre-mix them. You don't want to have a batch that is all cranberries and then a batch that is all white chocolate chips. You want to mix them into here. I usually add about half or so, a little bit more than half. Depress the head, get it in here, start mixing them a little bit, and then add the other half, the other batch in here slowly. You don't want to add too much at a time. And really, you don't want to use the mixer to mix it in there, because when you hand form the cookies, as you can see here, they're starting to come out. So I'm going to depress it in there. Depress it in there. And then depress it. But when you hand form the cookies, that's what's really going to do the mixing, not your machine. You don't want to break up the condiments inside the cookie mix. So what you want to do now is oil up a cookie sheet. I have my oil inside of a sprayer. It makes it very nice and easy to oil it up. And I have 2 cookie sheets here. I add a little bit of oil. And then what I'll do is I'll take one of those tri or half paper towel, and I will wipe my cookie sheets down with it. I'm actually going to need 2 hands here, but that's okay. I started doing it. And you want to make sure it's well oiled. You don't want to have cookies sticking to your cookie sheet. Just make sure there's a nice good coating of oil on here. Nothing crazy, but a nice good coating. Now you want to roll out the cookie dough into little balls. Right here I have balls. They're approximately 1/4 cup of cookie dough each one. Make sure you have good and equal spacing between them all. As you can see here, I have them in a pattern here, 3-2, 3-2, or 2-3, 2-3, however you want to look at it. But make sure you have nice good spacing between them, because they are going to settle as the butter melts and spread out as it heats up. And then you put them in the oven. My oven is set for 300 degrees. You might want to put it a little bit higher than that, but my oven actually runs a little hot right now, and it is preheated. I'm about to add them in there. Don't mind my pizza, that's my dinner. Shove them in the oven and close it up. I always leave my light on when I'm cooking in my oven. My light is a good indicator that my oven is on. They'll stay in here for about 10 to 15 minutes, and that's the point where you want to check them, depending on your temperature and how your oven actually cooks. Last but not least, with the remaining cookie dough, if you don't decide to cook all of them, you want to put them in baggies, little freezer baggies. And here I put about a dozen cookies in each bag. As you saw on my tray, I actually cooked 10, so 12 is not too far off. I have a little toaster oven too I use, and I break them off in 3s or whatever. But you'll get about approximately 2 dozen cookies with the remaining. And then I also have 2 dozen in the oven right now, so it makes 4 dozen cookies. And that's about it. Look at these cookies melt down into shape. Another thing I forgot to mention too, if you keep them in your refrigerator, the cookie dough that is, it'll last about 2 weeks max. I wouldn't go much more than 1.5 weeks or 2 weeks without baking them. If you put them in your freezer, it'll go about 2 months. But when you add them in your freezer, you might want to add a little bit of flour to keep them so that they can separate a little bit. And as you see here, I also have 2 racks really close together. The bottom cookies will cook faster than the top cookies will, because my heating element's down here at the bottom. And these are my delicious cookies. You notice I have them on a plate, not on a little grate thing to let them cool down. Oh well, I don't have it in my kitchen. oh well. But they are nice and soft. They are fairly thick, so they will be soft when you serve them out. I'm actually going to serve these out tomorrow. And I got about 2 dozen of them, or 24 cookies for my department. All right. Thank you very much. Leave any comments, please, and enjoy.